Đại sứ New Zealand tại Việt Nam lên bảng chủ tọa để điều hành phiên họp. Distinguished delegates, the second plenary session now begins. May I kindly invite on the stage Her Excellency Wendy Matthews, Ambassador of New Zealand to Vietnam, for moderating the session. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Xin chào quý vị. Trong tiếng Mari thì câu tôi vừa nói nghĩa là tôi xin chào mừng quý vị. Trong buổi
On the designing and implementing of national action plans, successes and challenges from selected countries. The objective of this session is to review the experience and expertise of countries that have taken the important goals of women, peace and security and taken them into concrete plans in their domestic countries. The speakers will present experiences in the development, approval and monitoring of national action plans in their country and highlight some of the gaps and challenges. I'm delighted that today we have three very distinguished keynote speakers. It is my privilege now to introduce and invite our first speaker, Her Excellency Johanna Sumuvuori, State Secretary, the Finnish Minister for Foreign Affairs. Beyond her very distinguished diplomatic career, she also has experience as a Member of Parliament, a City Councillor, and has taken leading positions in civil society. She brings with her a wealth of experience in peace and security, and I would like to invite her to be the first keynote speaker today.
I hope that you hear me. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the groundbreaking UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. Both are crucial milestones for advancement of women's leadership and participation in peace and security processes, and of the necessity to take the gendered impacts of conflict and violence fully into account. They underline the need to promote gender equality. Exclusion of women and human rights violations are root causes of conflict and fragility. This fall, with the UN 75 declaration adopted in September 2020, all UN member states pledged to accelerate action to achieve gender equality, women's participation, and the empowerment of women and girls in all domains. Unfortunately, we witness global pushback on women's and girls' rights. This is the lack of unanimous support to the full implementation of the 1325 agenda. It's worrisome. It is necessary to reaffirm our collective commitment and speed up the implementation of the 1325 agenda globally. Finland stands in the front line for this issue. I'm concerned by the increasing level of violence and threats against women, human rights defenders, aid workers, peace builders, and political leaders, as well as the shrinking space for civil society. Finland is committed to promote sexual and reproductive health and rights for victims of sexual violence in conflicts. We call on all parties to conflict to abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law and international human rights law to stop all forms of sexual violence in conflict. We do not accept impunity of the offenders. Disasters, crises and conflicts are linked to global challenges such as climate change, environmental degradation, displacement and pandemics. The negative impact of COVID-19, particularly on women, have shown that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is central to addressing women's inclusion and leadership and the increasing threat of violence against women and girls. This underlines the need for holistic, whole of government and cross-pillar approaches to security by all actors. For the European Union and its member states, supporting and advancing gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls are at the core of our policies at home and abroad. The EU is in the forefront of promoting the full, equal and meaningful participation of women in peace processes. The European Union is leading by example and has adopted comprehensive strategies such as Gender Action Plan 3 and Comprehensive Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security. The future of Women, Peace and Security agenda depends on how we will all work together and build alliances to accelerate implementation and achieve results. We do not necessarily need new resolutions, but to act upon our promises. We need political will and sustainable and proactive financing. We must make transformational change in organizations and processes in order to make women's leadership and meaningful participation in peace processes a norm, not a rare exception. We must realize our commitment and walk the talk. Let me give some concrete examples. Women need to be part of delegations to peace talks. Representation of women in dialogue and mediation efforts are key to ensuring a sustainable outcome. Moreover, peace negotiators should be informed by gender perspective to ensure that the needs of the whole population are considered. Reporting from conflict situations should include gender analysis and sex disaggregated data. Consultations with women's organizations should be conducted regularly. We need to link local initiatives to formal peace talks. Briefings from women civil society representatives at the UN Security Council create informed decisions. Security sector reform, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration processes should integrate a gender perspective to achieve inclusive political transitions. In this spirit, Finland and Spain launched last year a global initiative, Commitment 2025, on women's inclusion in peace processes. It consists of 10 strong and concrete commitments, both political and financial, for the member states and 5 actions for the UN to undertake. We are glad that some dozen countries with good women, peace and security track record have joined in, and I would like to invite others to do the same. This plenary session will discuss national action plans and their successes and challenges. Finland was amongst the first countries to launch National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security. National action plans remain key tools for advancing the 1325 agenda, and currently about 145 UN member states have prepared their own national action plans. But unfortunately, not all are adequately resourced, financed, implemented or monitored. These action plans are and could be concrete steps to move from rhetorics to actions and to achieving results throughout the full 1325 agenda. Let me say a few words about Finland's national action plan. I know that there is not a one fits for all model, but the national action plans need to be tailored to fit the local context and priorities. Evidence, however, shows that some characteristics in the national action plans are key to success. Created in partnership with civil society, having clearly identified roles, responsibilities and timelines, and supported by monitoring and evaluation. In Finland, we have identified clear roles and responsibilities. Different ministries, NGOs and agencies have a responsibility to implement the National Action Plan. And in order to ensure effective implementation, we have regular cooperation among the responsible parties and exchange of information on good practices. Finland's National Action Plan includes a strong monitoring and evaluation component. The action plan must also have some flexibility. In Finland, a midterm review of the 4-year action plan is carried out to enable possible modifications on the way. Finland reports annually to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Finnish Parliament about the implementation and financing of the NAP. Reporting to the Parliament is a powerful advocacy tool and a way to increase accountability and public debate. Finland is cooperating with many countries, often with and through UN Women, in design, resourcing, implementation, and monitoring of their national action plans. Among these countries are Tunisia, Jordan, Lebanon, and the regional national action plan of the Arab League. We also have a long-term partnership with Kenya and Nepal. During the past 5 years, Finland was the top donor of UN Women's 1325 network, and we intend to continue this cooperation. The full implementation of the 1325 agenda is a challenge for us all, but coordination, cooperation, inclusivity, additional financing, and innovative methods definitely are key to success. With these words, I wish you all a very successful and interesting conference. Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts and views on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. That was a very useful way to start off our discussion. Can I please call on our second keynote speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Amin Dahaparova, First Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. She has previously served as First Deputy Minister of Information Policy, and prior to that had a very distinguished career in radio and television media as an editor, journalist, and producer. Can I please hand the floor to you?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Can you hear me well?
Go ahead.
Okay, as far as we had some technical issues, so I need the confirmation if you can hear me well. Dear guests and friends, let me first of all thank Madam Minister of Finland for her important contribution and for briefing us on where Finland stands on in terms of implementation of peace and of 1325 resolution of the United Nations. And we also commend the government of Vietnam and the United Nations for holding this conference, which commemorates the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 3025. Ukraine is a member of the group of friends of this resolution, and together with partners, we promote a whole range of issues that has been related to the protection of women in conflicts and increasing their role in peace processes. This year, UN Secretary General report on women, peace and security highlights that without radical action over the next decade to integrate women into all aspects of peace, we risk a continuous state of insecurity, hate and instability, and prolonged conflicts. For us, this issue gained new importance after Russia launched armed aggression against Ukraine in 2014, and me, as an eternally displaced person, may witness this. Women and girls in occupied areas of Donbass face intimidation, detention, and ill treatment, physical and sexual violence. In occupied Crimea, my homeland, oppressive policies against Crimean Tatar women, in particular activists, human rights defenders, relatives of political hostages and prisoners, have become a daily reality. Among 1.5 million of eternally displaced persons like myself who left their homes as a result of Russian aggressive policy, the most vulnerable are women and girls. The number, according to the statistics, amounts up to 60% of women among all of the IDPs. In 2016, Ukraine became the first country in the world which adopted and implemented National Action Plan on the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 3025 while countering an ongoing external armed aggression. We are among 86 UN member states that implement such action plan. Only the third of these national plans, including Ukraine, envisage a budget for their implementation. It is also noteworthy that in our national plan, the role of civil society is quite meaningful. I'm proud to say that 18 civil society organizations have taken part in initiating, implementing, and monitoring of the first and second National Action Plan, which was adopted in October this year. The second National Action Plan that envisages the period up till 2025 was developed in a highly participatory manner and is a second generation plan because it is result-oriented based on 4 pillars of 1325: participation, prevention, protection, and recovery. As the previous one, the new National Action Plan 3025, among other things, focuses on achieving greater participation of women in decision-making, in particular in national security and defense peacemaking, etc. Let me mention important role of women that play in the military of Ukraine. Women constitute 23.6% of Ukrainians' armed forces. This number increased by over 15 times since 2008, from 1.800 up to 29,760, with 900 of them being senior officers. Among them, military personnel more than 15% and civilians more than 8%. Among personnel directly taking part in defending Ukraine against Russian aggression in Donbass, over 10% are women. Female volunteers provide tangible support at the front line. Women also constitute over 8% of Ukrainian peacekeeping contingent. The government of Ukraine pays specific attention to the needs of women veterans as they face difficulties after returning to a peaceful life, ranging from finding employment and getting free medical services to overcoming public stereotypes. As First Deputy Foreign Minister, I also like to say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actively participating in the implementation of the National Action Plan. We are proud to be the first among the state bodies of Ukraine which conducted the gender equality audit in 2019. As a follow-up, we developed a clear and consistent action plan aimed at ensuring equal rights and opportunities for women and men within the diplomatic service of Ukraine. In less than a year, 6 women were appointed as ambassadors to promote the national interests of Ukraine and its citizens in Finland, Mexico, South Africa, Morocco, Jordan, and Singapore. To conclude, Ukraine stays committed to the Women, Peace and Security agenda and will support meaningful participation of women in peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. The government and civil society organizations, together with the international community, should consolidate their efforts and ensure the protection of those who build peace, those who protect society from aggressions. The Women, Peace and Security agenda should be considered as a crisis prevention tool to build a more resilient and peaceful world. And we, as Ukraine and as a society, will continue our efforts aimed to further promote the WPC agenda and strengthen its implementation at national, regional, and international levels. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. That was a very interesting explanation of what the Ukraine is doing and how you are taking tangible actions in this area. I would like to call on my third keynote speaker now, Her Excellency Elsa Reyna, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women in New York. She's previously served as Sweden's Minister for Children, the Elderly and Gender Equality. She has held extensive leadership positions in the area of gender equality and empowerment in both government, NGOs and the UN. Can I please call on you for your third speaker? Oh, apologies, after my introduction, apparently she is not online. So with that, we will turn to some of the panelists that we have. First of all, we have a number of very distinguished panelists, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Essentially how we can boil down the national action plans and bring to life some of the goals that are in the 1325. Some of the questions that have been put to our panelists include how to include marginalised communities in national action plan processes, how to ensure there is monitoring and accountability in the national action plans, and where parliaments, media and civil society can play a role. Also, how plans can take account into new circumstances and challenges, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these points our keynote speakers have already touched on. Our panellists, can I please remind you that you have 5 minutes for your remarks? And in the interest of time, I will just very briefly introduce our panellists, but I would like to say they all come with very distinguished CVs, and you can see those in your packs. It's a real privilege to have such diverse views on our panel today. So with that, do I call the Japanese? Yes, okay, I'm getting nods. So I will call on, from Japan, His Excellency, Mr. Takashi Uto, State Minister for Foreign Affairs.
ご出席の皆様、外務副大臣の宇都隆です。本女性平和安全保障国際会議を主催するベトナム政府と国連に敬意を表します。本日はパネルディスカッション WPS 行動計画のデザインと実施において日本政府を代表しメッセージを寄せることができ光栄に存じます。日本は2015年に WPS 行動計画を策定しました。
Nghị quyết 1325 của Liên Hợp Quốc và chúng tôi đã thu thập các ý kiến rất đa dạng.
作業を進めた結果、国内外における取り組みや災害対応も含めた包括的な行動計画を策定することができました。実施においては定期的にモニタリングを行っており、外部有識者による評価を受けて報告書も作成しています。WPS 行動計画の実施について、日本は参画、予防、保護、人道、復興支援の4分野で国内外において具体的な行動を進めてきました。一例を挙げると、G7 WPS パートナーシップイニシアティブのもと、日本はスリランカを支援し、スリランカの国家行動計画の策定の支援、国民和解と和平プロセスにおける女性の参画を進めてきました。また、国際機関や JICA 等を通じてさまざまな支援を実施しており、中東、アフリカの紛争影響国での女性の保護や暴力の被害者に対する支援、経済的エンパワーメントのための支援、紛争下の性的暴力の予防のための警察や軍、司法の能力強化、PKO 要員の訓練など支援の幅は多岐にわたります。日本は国際的な枠組みにおいてもさまざまな支援を行っています。国連の紛争下の性的暴力法の支配に関する専門家チームの活動を積極的に支援し、2014年以降、コンゴ民主共和国、ソマリアおよび中央アフリカ、イラクにおける TOE のプロジェクトに対し950万ドルの財政支援を行ってきました。また日本は2018年から国連女性機関のイニシアティブのもと、アジア、アフリカ、中東における平和安全保障、人道支援の推進を目的とした活動のために約880万米ドルの資金協力をしています。さらに本年、日本は2018年ノーベル平和賞受賞者のデニス・ムクウェゲ医師とナディア・ムラドさんが創設した紛争関連の性的暴力の生存者のためのグローバル基金にも200万ユーロを拠出し、積極的に支援しています。また日本が議長を務めた2019年の G20 大阪サミットでは、紛争予防、平和構築における女性の役割の重要性を首脳宣言に明記しました。現在、新型コロナウイルス感染症が世界的に拡大している中で、その影響を最小限に抑え、紛争の影響を受けた人々を含むすべての人々が尊厳を持って生活できるより良い社会を構築することが私たちに求められています。日本はこの危機を好機に変えるため、国際社会や 市民社会と連携しながら本分野に引き続き取り組んでまいります。ご清聴ありがとうございました。本日の会合が昨日に引き続き実りあるものとなることを心から記念申し上げます。
Thank you very much for those perspectives. I would now like to call on our second distinguished panellist, Marta Zakowski, State Secretary of Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Norway. You have the floor. Sorry, we can't hear you yet. Do you want to try again? Perhaps just while we're having technical difficulties, I might move to our next speaker, if I may. So can I please turn to Stefania Dobel, from Head of the International Affairs Department, Ministry of Women and Gender Equality of Chile.
Good morning. Can you hear me well? Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I salute Mr. Pekka Haavisto, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Ms. Emin Chaparova, First Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, of course, Ms. Oza Regner, Assistant Secretary.
You're back on. Please try again. All right, bear with us with some technical difficulties. If I may, I'll turn to my third panelist. If I can please call on Ms. Aganesta Fal Dutra Santos, Program Coordinator and Policy Specialist from the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Can you hear me well?
You're coming through clearly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much again. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you also to other distinguished speakers. I think the remarks and presentations have really shown some of the advances, some of the good practices that we have in the development and implementation of national action plans on women, peace and security. Like you mentioned, my name is Agnieszka Faldutra Santos, and I work at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. GNWP, or the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, is a coalition of women's rights and women-led peace-building organizations in over 40 countries. And we are a recognized civil society leader that both influences the policies on women, peace and security, as well as youth peace and security and sustaining peace, and ensures their effective implementation on the ground, especially in local communities. So based on that experience, I hope today to share with you some of the insights from our work, from our experiences across different countries on what works and what is the future of the implementation of women, peace and security. As some of the previous speakers have highlighted, through the years, we have seen the development and replication of some good practices of NAP development. These include the inclusion of monitoring frameworks with specific indicators and clear objectives in many NAPs, as the speaker from Finland, Her Excellency, has highlighted. More and more countries are also using the reporting to the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, to reflect and report on women, peace and security implementation progress. And I know Ukraine is one of the countries that's preparing such some vision, and it's a good practice that GNWP has advocated for quite some time. We've also seen, more NAPs having a dedicated budget. We've supported participatory costing and budgeting in Georgia, Jordan, Lebanon, Nepal, amongst others. But recently we see a declining trend actually in terms of the number of NAPs with budget. So it's a mixed practice. And finally, we see an inclusive process for NAP development also being recognized as a good practice and increasingly used, as mentioned in Ukraine, for example, but also recently in other countries such as Jordan, Kenya, Uganda, and many others. Importantly, something I wanted to highlight is that the participation of refugees and IDPs, the importance of having those actors included in the NAP development process is also increasingly being recognized as a good practice. So these are the good practices in terms of the development of national action plans. To us at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, to see true progress and implementation, these good practices need to become standard practices. It should be unthinkable, impossible to have NAP development process without these. And another good practice that should become a standard practice, and I would like to focus on today, is localization of women, peace, and security, which is a strategy that's necessary to ensure that these national action plans developed in a participatory manner with strong monitoring frameworks and even with the budget don't remain just a paper on the shelf. So at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, we have pioneered localization 10 years ago, and since then have implemented it in 16 countries. We're glad to see that it has also been replicated by other actors, including UN Women and civil society organizations in many of those countries, including Ukraine, for example, which I know we have represented with us on the panel today as well. In terms of, so localization is a bottom-up strategy that really allows local actors, including local authorities, local women and youth, and those from marginalized communities, to develop an understanding and ownership of women, peace, and security resolutions and the National Action Plan, and to translate them into concrete actions on the ground. And critically, what I want to highlight is that localization doesn't happen in a vacuum or in isolation from other local governance processes. On the contrary, it is really an approach, a methodology that allows the local governance actors to make sure that their laws and policies are both gender responsive and conflict sensitive, because this is what really allows for the implementation of women, peace, and security. In practical terms, and we can go to the next slide here, the methodology consists of 3 phases. The first phase really convenes or bring together diverse actors, like I already said, women, youth, representatives of marginalized communities, but also local authorities, mayors, governors, councillors, religious and traditional leaders, security sector, etc. Together, they discuss the resolutions, they discuss the NAP, and identify the ways in which this is relevant to their local context and the conflict impact in it. The second phase, which can take quite some time, I think this is the common thread across all of these good practices. They require investment of time, effort, and resources. So does the second phase here, which is the actual drafting of local policies. And the local actors decide themselves whether it's a local action plan, or it's a new law or bylaw or policy at the local level, or it's provisions into existing laws, policies, or plans, or a combination of the 3. And finally, the third phase or third component of localization is to ensure its sustainability. And for that, we promote and support the development of context-specific localization guidelines. For example, in DRC, they've been adopted in Nepal, and now more recently they're being developed in Kenya and Ukraine, as well as training of trainers, so that there is a pool of champions, pool of experts that can replicate localization so that it really becomes a standard practice. Another good practice in this regard of sustainability is institutionalizing localization by building it into the national action plans. So, in the National Action Plan, recognizing that localization is a key strategy and should be the key strategy for women, peace, and security implementation, and mandating the local governance actors to conduct it or to implement localization. I will share a link in the chat to a step-by-step toolkit which describes this methodology in a little bit more detail. But before I wrap up, I wanted to highlight 3 concrete benefits of localization, because I know the time is short. And the 3 concrete benefits are inclusion, harmonization, and tangible impacts. First, on inclusion, localization really allows to engage wider group of stakeholders and conflict-affected populations at the local level, but also nationally and at the development of national action plan. For example, in Ukraine, thanks to localization, we were able to engage the so-called new groups emerged from the conflict. So, for example, war widows, female veterans, internally displaced person. And this engagement that started at the local level, eventually, through the support of our in-country partner, Democracy Development Center, has also provided these groups with access to influence the national action planning. And for example, the review of the national action plan in Ukraine in 2018, midterm review, during which the priorities and concerns of these groups were better integrated into the NAP. In Colombia, in the absence of the national action plan, the local action plans have also provided an opportunity for indigenous women, for example, to bring their priorities and translate women, peace and security in line with their concerns and priorities. Another important benefit of localization is harmonization. So like I said, localization does not operate in a vacuum. It does not aim to increase bureaucratic burdens by just creating another document that sits there on the shelf and that we need to report on. On the contrary, it allows local communities, including the local authorities, to analyze their everyday government functions and policies to see what is promoting or hindering the implementation of women, peace and security resolutions. And so as part of that process, local authorities, together with local women and other representatives of marginalized groups, review existing local laws and policies and together decide whether they need to create new ones, adopt a local action plan, or simply integrate additional provisions to existing policies. And in Colombia, that has worked really well also with the implementation of the peace agreement, wherein the localization work and advocacy of local women peace builders, supported by GNWP and by Red Nacional de Mujeres, with support from Norwegian Development Agency as well, has allowed women in Cauca and Tolima departments integrate specific provisions that are needed to advance the implementation of the peace agreement in the local development plans. So this both advances the implementation of the peace agreement and makes the local governance more conflict sensitive and gender responsive. And finally, like I said, localization creates tangible impacts in the lives of local women and local communities. And there are countless examples of this, but I'll just share a couple because I know I'm almost done with my time. And they can be very small. In Georgia, for example, it was as simple as establishing a public bus route between the town of Zugdidi and a small nearby village. And that allowed women to access economic opportunities, to access decision-making spaces that they didn't have access to before. And so has really contributed to achieving the objective of women's economic empowerment in the country's NAP. And similarly in Uganda, the women worked with local police officers to establish, gender desks and community liaison officers. And as a result, there was an increase in reporting of gender-based violence and domestic violence cases. So again, very tangible impacts, very tangible ways to translate the commitments under women, peace and security into concrete actions. I'll stop here because I know we still have other speakers that will share excellent experiences, but I just wanted to conclude with this one thought. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is the agenda of women peace builders. Women peace builders conceived of it, they pushed for it, they drafted it, and secured its adoption, and today they are at the forefront of its implementation. So they must be included at every stage, from the design to implementation to monitoring of NAPs. But at the same time, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is not only for women and women peace builders. It benefits entire communities. It makes them more equitable and less prone to violent conflict. Therefore, there is a need for a diverse range of actors to know about the agenda and to be involved in its implementation. And localization is a unique tool that allows to bring together these actors to ensure this broad-based support and ownership, but without diminishing the leadership of women, and especially the local women peace builders, who are at the forefront of building and sustaining peace, and today also at the forefront of COVID-19 response and recovery. So I think especially as we find ourselves in this new reality, localization is really the future of women, peace and security agenda, and we look forward to seeing it becoming not only a good practice, but a standard practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very powerful description of how we can ensure national action plans are not pieces of paper on a shelf. Now, if we can try again, I would like to call on Marta Zikowski, if we could try again, who, just to remind you, is State Secretary of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway. Please, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, that's great. Clear.
Perfect. Excellencies, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties that we had over here in Oslo, but I'm very happy to join you from Oslo this afternoon. I'd like to thank Vietnam and the UN for hosting this conference today, and Vietnam has shown such a strong commitment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda and has been making its mark as a member of the UN Security Council and as chair of ASEAN 2020. We are very much looking forward to cooperating with Vietnam on this agenda next year when both countries are serving on the Security Council. In this session, we are taking a closer look at the role of national action plans in moving the Women, Peace and Security agenda forward. And I'd like to make 3 points about the importance of these plans, and I'd like to illustrate them by sharing some of Norway's experience in these areas. Firstly, the plans are important because they focus our efforts. 2 years ago, we adopted the 4th Norwegian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. It was launched by 5 ministers, underscoring the strong commitment of the government and the active engagement of these ministries. One of the trends we had observed during the periods covered by the first 3 plans was that our plans were expanding thematically. So it was therefore important for us to define a primary focus for the 4th plan to avoid ending up without any focus at all. We have identified 4 priority areas, all closely linked to Norway's peace and security efforts. These 4 areas are support for peace and reconciliation processes, implementation of peace agreements, peace operations, and humanitarian response. The new plan highlights our commitment to promote women's rights and participation from the early phases of peace initiatives right through to after a peace agreement has been signed. In practice, this means that a gender perspective must be integrated in conflict analysis. Women must be consulted early on, and we must maintain the same focus during the implementation of agreements. Moreover, in order for the plans to be realized, they must be practical. This is why we have developed implementation tools such as Norway's guidelines for the Foreign Service. So each mediation team has been instructed to draw up its own basic strategic plan for how it will promote women's participation and rights in its work. My second point is that plans are vital because they spur important processes. In Norway, we have cooperated closely with civil society and academia in developing our national action plans and in the follow-up. We consult both civil society partners in priority countries for women, peace and security and partners within the UN. These partners provide an independent voice and a variety of perspectives and often raise important questions. They point out shortcomings in our plans and suggest improvements. This leads me to my third point, accountability. Through evaluations of our work, and annual reports on implementation, we can be held accountable and we can correct our course if needed. Monitoring, reporting, and evaluation enable us to learn more systematically from our mistakes and successes alike. This system of accountability also shows others what we're doing well and where we need to improve. In closing, I'd like to reiterate Norway's commitment to work to promote women's rights and inclusion when we take our seat as an elected member of the Security Council in January. We will draw on our extensive experience of peace and reconciliation efforts. We will do our utmost to move this agenda forward by contributing to reports, taking part in field visits, and by working with the other members of the Council to develop mandates, resolutions, and presidential statements. Because mandates and resolutions have an impact on the ground. We look forward to working with Vietnam and a range of other good forces to ensure that the peace we build is lasting and benefits both women and men. Thank you.
Thank you for that very useful presentation and your perspectives on how gender has to be included right from the start of the process and all through the process. Can I now please call on Her Excellency Åsa Rayner, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director, UN Women, New York. For those who heard my description before, she has previously served as Sweden's Minister for Children, the Elderly and Gender Equality, and she has held extensive leadership positions in the area of gender equality and empowerment in government, NGOs and the UN. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, Åsa?
Do we have Åsa online? All right, apologies again for some technical difficulties. We may move on to one of the other panelists. So would I be able to, we'll try again for UN Women in a moment. Can I please call on Ms. Susan Aref Maroof, founder and director of the Women Empowerment Organization in Iraq. Please.
Hello, good. I do not say good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Coming through loud and clear.
Hello.
Yes, please continue. We can hear.
Okay. First, I would like to thank you for giving me this great opportunity to participate in such important event. I would like to speak about our experience in Iraq by developing the first national action plan in Middle East and North Africa. And the civil society in Iraq have played a major role in supporting the development and implementation of the first national action plan. They were involved structurally in the development, implementation through their participation in the cross-sector task force. So the impact, the NAP, the National Action Plan, provided an opportunity for the civil society organization in Iraq to work within the framework of cooperation with government institutions to discuss, advocate, and work on women issues in an effective participatory manner. And also the NAP was facilitated the development and maintenance of an open dialogue about the link between violence against women, peace and security, and sustainable development among decision and policy makers. The NAP has provided opportunities to increase awareness about women's rights through bringing knowledge on UN Security Council Resolution 1325 as a tool for strengthening the role of women, discussing gender equality issues, and influencing policy making. So the National Action Plan is an important instrument that robust to the aligning of national strategy, policies, and action with the international women's rights mechanism like CEDAW, SDG, Beijing, and this is the most important element and instrument for women, peace, and security. But we know that this National Action Plan faced difficulties, challenges, obstacles. The first one was Daesh intervention in Iraq, the financial crisis also, which affected in lack of budgeting and resource for implementing the National Action Plan as planned. But of course, also the fragile political will affected on the implementation of the first National Action Plan. And for recommendation, we need to strengthen the leadership, ownership of the state actors to maintain the political will on the women, peace, security. The National Action Plan process opened the door to mainstreaming gender, but this process needs to be strengthened and maintained. Also, for better implementation of the NAPs, we need, of course, monitoring mechanism, accountability, and also how women, victims, can benefit from the implementation. We have to localize the NAPs and how women from any part of the country can benefit from the plan and the resolution. Media and promotion of women, peace, security. And also, as we know, the pandemic of COVID-19 multiplied the crisis on women. So also the NAPs should respond to the crisis and to the pandemic. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for those very useful perspectives and for sharing them with us today. Please bear with us on technical difficulties. We're going to try for lucky number 3 to see if we can call on Her Excellency Ms. Osa Reina, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Do we have UN Women online? UN Woman? No, okay. Sorry, again. Maybe 4th time lucky. So we will turn to one of our other fantastic panelists. Can I please call again on from Chile, Ms. Stefania Dobel, Head, International Affairs Department, Ministry of Women and Gender Equality of Chile. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me better this time?
That is great, coming through clear.
Perfect. Apologies for the technical difficulties and excellencies and distinguished panelists. It is an honor for me and for Chile to participate in this event. I'd like to start by thanking the government of Vietnam and the United Nations for organizing this global conversation on women, peace, and security on the year of the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1335, and at a time where this agenda has more relevance than ever. Women, peace, and security and Resolution 1325 constitutes normative and political women's rights in the face of gender violence, sexual abuse in crisis and conflict situations, and to understand the differential impacts that crises of any kind have over women. The Women, Peace and Security agenda has had an important place in Chile's foreign policy. We were pioneers in our region, implementing the first National Action Plan in 2009, then led the way again in 2015, updating it and launching a second National Action Plan. And we are now striving to become the first country in Latin America and the Caribbean to transition to a third generation National Action Plan. I'd like to then briefly tell you a little bit about what this journey has taught us, highlighting the lessons we've learned and reflecting on some of the new opportunities that we see for the Women, Peace and Security agenda to address the emerging challenges posed by the COVID-19 crisis. So as I was telling you, our first NAP saw the light in 2009, and it was marked by a context of Chile's important contributions to UN peace operations and a strong political will led by former President Michelle Bachelet, who had been the first female Minister of Defense and National Security before becoming the first female president. So our first NAP main objective centered on the protection and prevention of GBV and sexual abuse in peace operations, and it had a solid theoretical framework and quite a holistic approach for its time, incorporating government agencies with broader mandates, such as the Ministry of Health, Education, and Social Development, in an attempt to address peace and security issues with an integral perspective. Our second plan came in 2015, and following the recommendations of the Secretary General, it was structured under the four pillars of prevention, participation, protection, and relief or recovery. And its strongest attribute was its methodological soundness. It incorporated a clear results-based framework with indicators for monitoring and responsibilities for each government department involved. Now, on the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325, the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Women, and the Minister of Defense and Homeland Security have announced that we will start the process of drafting our third NAP. Here, what we're looking for is creating a framework of the new local and global challenges, such as incorporating a gender lens in all emergency response and recovery strategies, including to natural disasters or health crises such as COVID, and also strengthening women's roles in conflict prevention. So we're now standing at a point where we need to address many of the questions shaping the development of the WPS agenda at the moment. How can we develop changes in our understanding of conflict? How can we do so with a whole of government perspective and ensuring a people-centered approach focused on sustaining peace? I believe these questions are all tightly linked. Firstly, to the question of adapting to the new challenges, I think the paradigm of sustaining peace in itself, challenging the traditional idea of peace and conflict as a binary, opens new realms of action for the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Understanding peace as a continuum, as a goal, and as a process where the focus is placed on conflict prevention and on creating the conditions for societies to grow in an inclusive manner is tightly linked with the goals of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. As we know, there is vast evidence that greater gender equality, more peaceful societies, and the main pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda become more relevant than ever in these times of global crisis, where we need to strengthen the social fabric of our societies and our response capacity to multiple crises in a holistic manner. But so what do we achieve this? And how do we achieve this? And how do we do so in a time of crisis where resources are extremely scarce? WIP's step is to see on de-siloing this agenda from security and defense circles and to strengthen a holistic approach that builds on the several links to emerging global threats and the important framework that the agenda can give us to address these new challenges, such as responding to health crises and humanitarian emergencies with a gender lens, building on the strong ties to promote their role in mitigating climate change, or promoting economic recovery with a sustaining peace lens by investing in women's economic reactivation. By de-siloing and effectively linking the agenda to the multiple institutions and stakeholders involved in its implementation, we can pull together our limited resources to achieve a greater impact. Another central, if not absolute crucial aspect is political will. And to gain this, it is key that we work on socializing the women, peace and security agenda with decision makers at all spheres and levels, highlighting the connection that this agenda has to broader goals, such as advancing gender equality and building sustaining peace and sustainable development. Shining a light on these links can help make the case for governments to acknowledge the relevance of this agenda as an instrument to bolster many other national priorities. This will help mainstreaming women, peace and security goals in other national agendas, ensuring coherence with national equality plans or development strategies. Lastly, as for the question on how to make this agenda as participatory as possible, this is an agenda that in itself, in its nature, it's people-driven. Therefore, it is key that we as states ensure the full and effective participation of civil society and communities in the design and implementation of our national action plans. That's the approach that we've implemented with our two previous national action plans in Chile, and the one that it's more important than ever now for our third one. The COVID-19 crisis and the social outbreak that Chile and many countries in our region have experienced in the last year have been incredibly relevant in showing us the differentiated impact of crisis on women, and most importantly, the need for them to be at the center of responses and of building sustaining peace. As you may know, the people of Chile voted recently in a plebiscite to write a new constitution, which will be the first in the world to be drafted by a constituent assembly with full gender parity, guaranteeing that women have an equal voice in defining a new common vision of society. Women's strong ties with communities makes them hugely relevant for building and reconstructing the social fabric from the bottom up. And this is particularly important in countries that need to rebuild trust with its citizens and reform highly questioned institutions such as police forces. Here, the role of women is central. Having more women at high-level positions and incorporating a gender and human rights approach throughout security policies and institutions can be a huge step towards building more trust and legitimacy with society as a whole. And to end in this direction, we have been working to ensure that a strong gender and people-centered approach is instilled in the ongoing police reform process. We are also creating a virtual platform that encourages women's active participation in the constitutional process, and we will soon launch, alongside Argentina and many countries in the region, the first network of women mediators in the Southern Cone. All these initiatives are a reflection of the understanding that lasting peace can only be achieved through promoting the base conditions that allow societies to prosper under the rule of law and democratic and inclusive institutions that promote the peaceful resolution of conflict at all levels of society. This is where women's role is central and where the Women, Peace and Security agenda can serve as a roadmap for our country to advance towards sustaining peace and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to your third generation of the National Action Plan, which is very impressive. Can I please now call on Pavi Canesto from UN Women? You have the floor.
I'm sorry, I think you were muted, the host.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Well, I was checking if you invited UN Women to speak, because I think you were muted.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So yes, I am Päivi Kannisto. I'm the Chief of Peace, Security and Humanitarian from UN Women New York. And I apologize very much on behalf of our Deputy Executive Director, Åsa Regner, who really tried to connect to this session, and it just couldn't work. So apologies, deep apologies from her. She really wanted to be here. Anyway, we wanted from UN Women to give a little bit of global overview of national action plans. Since the adoption of the Security Council resolution 20 years ago, through presidential statements and resolutions, Security Council has consistently called on member states to develop and adopt national action plans. The first one was adopted in 2005 by Denmark. And now, as we celebrate this 20th anniversary, we have more than 90 United Nations member states that have adopted a national action plan at least once. And at least 15 countries are on the third iteration of that plan. National action plans are an effective means to foster women's full inclusion in preventing conflicts and the protection of their rights in these contexts, in managing conflicts and humanitarian crises, in ending conflicts and in sustaining peace. Through national action plans, many member states have been able to expand their work on protecting women human rights defenders, advocating for women's participation at the peace table, and to seek accountability for sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. At the regional level, we have also seen a concerted effort from regional organizations to promote the development and implementation of national action plans. From the European Union to the African Union, to NATO, to the Southern African Development Community, as well as to the OSCE, regional organizations are contributing to accountability on the women, peace and security agenda by supporting member states on analysis, technical expertise, and monitoring of national action plans. The commitment by the ASEAN to give greater prominence to this agenda is very welcome. In 2015, the global study on the implementation of Resolution 1325 identified key components for an impact-driven national action plan. These included strong leadership and effective coordination, inclusive design processes, costed and allocated budgets, monitoring and evaluation, and flexibility to adapt to emerging situations. As we deal with the current challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, we are reminded of the importance of designing national action plans and national action plan coordination processes that are agile enough to respond to new emergencies and new situations. As we support the call of the Secretary General for a global ceasefire and to ensure women's meaningful participation at the peace table, I want to recall the critical need for member states to include in their national action plans concrete actions to address how specific groups of women, disabled, indigenous, migrant and minority populations within and outside of their borders face different, often structural and intersecting forms of exclusion, discrimination and inequality. I also want to strongly reiterate the recommendation from Secretary General's 2020 report on women, peace and security for member states to allocate dedicated funding for their national action plans in centralized and sectoral budgets and to annually track expenditures toward national action plan implementation. This is a point that bears repeating, given that one of the preeminent challenges of facing national action plans is a lack of funding. In the absence of adequate funding, a national action plan stands little chance of having the intended effect of real impact in the lives of women and girls, men and boys, and entire communities. If we are to achieve transformative change on women, peace and security, We need whole of government approach of funding national action plans. That starts with inclusion of the needs of populations at local level and engages various ministries, departments and agencies, along with meaningful participation from civil society throughout the life cycle of a national action plan. I'm pleased to note that more countries are appointing women, peace and security ambassadors and special envoys to ensure that national action plan processes are not standalone processes, but are integrated and linked to existing foreign and domestic strategies and policies, including much welcomed feminist foreign policies. This coordination, together with parliamentary oversight, can provide sustained focus on effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. I also urge member states to join the 87 member states and regional organizations of the Women, Peace and Security Focal Points Network, engaged in peer learning on National Action Plan. As we look ahead to the next 20 years of implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda, I hope that the next 5 years will see nearly all, if not all, member states with an impact-driven national action plan. UN Women remains committed to partner with you on this worthy endeavor. Thank you so much, and yet again, a special greetings from Åsa Regner, who really would have wanted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Canesto, for very ably stepping into the breach. Now we have come to the end of our very informative panel, and just before I open up for questions, I understand we have a couple of countries that have indicated they wish to speak. So Fernando from Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Allow me to share the Brazilian experience, adding to the wealth of contributions presented by our distinguished panelists. Brazil has launched its National Action Plan in 2017 as a result of a broad consultation process. After a comprehensive review, in 2019, the plan was extended for a period of 4 years. It is structured around 4 pillars. 1, participation. 2, prevention and protection. 3, peace building and humanitarian cooperation. And 4, dissemination, awareness raising and engagement. One of its most innovative features was the inclusion of specific actions addressing the needs of refugee women and girls. In line with the plan, we have granted them priority in our resettlement program and adapted reception arrangements. Even though the numbers are still modest, the plan has prompted significant breakthrough regarding the participation of women in the military. In 2017, the most prominent military academy in Brazil has admitted for the first time ever 34 female cadets. In 2019, the Brazilian Navy allowed women to access all its combat ranks. In the area of peace building, our plan has steered our development cooperation programs towards the promotion of the socio-economic empowerment of women in post-conflict situations. With Guinea-Bissau, for instance, we are working on a project aimed at enhancing the access of women and girls to healthcare service. With the Cotton 4 countries, we have been working to include women in the production and research of cotton-related products. Brazil considers national action plans as invaluable tools to advance the women, peace, and security agenda. We support the call made by the Undersecretary General inviting countries to adopt national action plans, and in this regard, we will welcome initiatives like this one to exchange best practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fernando, Ambassador of Brazil to Vietnam. Now, I would also like to hand the mic to his colleague. We have the Ambassador of Denmark to Vietnam. Kim, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. This year, the world celebrates the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, as well as the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, a land win for women's and girls' rights. Today, after 20 years with Resolution 1325 and 9 additional Security Council resolutions, the Women, Peace and Security agenda remains as relevant as ever. Peace and security is not something which only regards half of the population. However, we still see, more often than not, that the meaningful inclusion of women in peace efforts is inadequate. Just look at the current peace negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban, where only 4 women are represented in the government's delegation and none in the Taliban's. Women's interests, needs and competences are often addressed as an add-on, if addressed at all. Cultural and structural barriers continue to keep women from participating fully. And too often, women are perceived more as victims than assets and actors for peace, despite their essential contributions in many conflict-related situations. This must be changed, and for obvious reasons. This year, Denmark will launch our 4th National Action Plan for Resolution 1325. Our approach is rights-based. Women's participation in building and sustaining peace is first and foremost a matter of their right to participate. Furthermore, we know that their full, equal and meaningful participation increases the chances of the peace to be more sustainable and enduring. That is a key factor we'll do more to highlight and to put forward. We have to insist that women are resources for peace before they are victims. And we have to make decision makers understand that the meaningful inclusion of women in peace processes is not only an end in itself, it is also a means to find more inclusive and sustainable ends to conflicts and crises, in the interest of all, both men and women. So, we have work to do. Denmark's new National Action Plan aims to incorporate women, peace and security in every aspect of our security and stabilization work, which also means bringing into play efforts for development. In some contexts, we need to combat poverty before we can expect to see women and young girls at the decision table. We will work with local women peace actors and find ways to support their work in a meaningful way. We will apply a survivor-centered way to support women who are recovering from sexual and gender-based violence, exploitation and harassment in conflict situations, and will continue to engage in prevention and accountability measures. We will persistently raise the need for a safe and enabling environment for women peace builders and human rights defenders, and support efforts to improve their security, both bilaterally and multilaterally. To put it short, we need to do more and to do better to create change on the ground. Thank you very much for giving me the floor today.
Thank you, and we have a short time left available for questions. We do have a wealth of experience on the panels. Do I have any questions from the floor? Please put up your hand if you have any questions from the floor. And can I just confirm we have no e-questions? Well, we are coming to the end of time, this end. So first of all, if I can thank all the speakers today. You brought such a wealth of experience, such a range of perspectives. I do have, in summary, a few key themes that I think came through very strongly from a number of quarters. The first was the need for an inclusive and participatory approach for developing the national action plans, and the need to ensure broad-based support and that civil society were involved in the development of national action plans. The second was the need for ensuring financial support. There needs to be resources sitting behind the national action plans. And something that particularly caught my eye was the comment around ensuring that there are gender approaches in data gathering to ensure that that can back up both your plan and the financial resources that are needed for them. And the third was monitoring. And the speakers had a range of thoughts about the best way to do this, including through Parliament, through cross-government ownership, through involvement of civil society, and the role of media was also mentioned. With that poor summary of what was a very rich discussion, can I again thank our panellists? And can I also take this opportunity from the perspective of the New Zealand government to also thank the Vietnam government and the United Nations for holding this very important conference. So with that, I will bring session 2 to a close. Thank you.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Wendy Matthew. Thank you. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Wendy Matthew. Thank you, Ambassador Wendy Matthew. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, phiên họp toàn thể thứ 2 đến đây kết thúc. Xin kính mời quý vị nghỉ giải lao và dùng bữa tối tại sảnh tầng 1. Đồng thời xin kính mời quý vị sẽ quay trở lại phòng họp lúc 8 giờ 30 để bắt đầu phiên họp toàn thể thứ 3. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn. Distinguished delegates, the second plenary session now closed. Please enjoy your buffet dinner outside the meeting hall and be back after 30 minutes for the third plenary sessions starting at 8:30. Thank you.
Hãy đến quê hương chúng tôi, ngắm mặt biển xanh xa tít chân trời.
Nghe sóng vỗ sát sao biển cả, buốt phi lao gió thổi trên bờ.
Buồm vươn cánh vượt sóng ra ngoài khơi, trong nắng hồng bừng lên sáng ngời.
Miền Nam đất nước quê hương chúng tôi, có rừng dừa xanh xa tít chân trời. Người thiếu nữ giạt dao tình trẻ, dáng xinh tươi đông tuổi yêu đời.
Lòng trai tráng rộng lớn như biển khơi, với cánh tay dựng nên đất trời.
Quê hương chúng tôi, miếng ngọt chè xanh bông trắng lưng đồi.
Đồng xanh lúa dập dờn biển cả, tiếng ai ru con ngủ du lời. Đồng xanh lúa thẳng cánh bay cò bay, đưa nước về làng quê sáng soi.
Việt Nam yêu dấu xanh xanh lũy tre, suối đổ về sông qua những nương chè.
Sông sông của xuân về biển cả, nước thanh niên vui tỏa muôn đời.
Mùa xuân tới nguồn sống dâng sục sôi, đất nước tôi Việt Nam sáng ngời.
Mùa xuân tới nguồn sống dâng sục sôi, đất nước tôi Việt Nam sáng ngời.
Bạn ơi hãy đến quê hương chúng tôi, ngắm mặt biển xanh xa tít